Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Gitin. We are up to Perek Ched Mishna Yud. Today's Mishnayot should be Le'elu Nishmat Neria ben Svetlana Ranbai Eliyahu ben Burchai Israelov Chana Bad Miriam Sason ben Raya and Yoshua ben Shifra Menuchatam Began Eden Amen and Avdi ben Chaim Lechaim v'derefua Shelemav Daniel Shalom ben Rosa Betoch Shar Cholei Israel. When a person writes a get mekushar, he usually gathers as many witnesses as there are folds in the get and tells them to sign them. Now, when a husband says to a number of people, all of you sign the get is not valid until all of them sign it, as we learned in chapter 6, Mishnah 7. And this is true even in the case of a regular get. This is because we assume he means that he does not want the get to be given unless it is signed by all of them. A bald get is considered invalid because we are concerned that the blank space was left for someone who was supposed to sign but did not. This creates a problem when a husband writes a get mekushar and he does not gather as many witnesses as there are folds in the get. If the blank folds are not signed, when the woman later brings this get to a different court, that court, not knowing the true story, will suspect that one of the appointed witnesses had not signed the get and they will invalidate it. The get in this case should really be valid because he appointed fewer witnesses than there are spaces on the get, and all those who were supposed to sign did so. Nevertheless, the rabbis disqualified the get because the courts that see it later will have no idea what really happened. As Rashi explains on page 81b in Masechet Gitin, it is therefore necessary to find additional people to sign the blank spaces. The Mishnah teaches who may do so. Get kereach hakol mashlimin alav. In the case of a bald get, anyone, even someone who is usually not fit to be a witness, can complete it by signing his name on a blank fold because he is simply filling in the space, not testifying. Divrei ben Anas. These are the words of Ben Anas. Now, according to Ben Anas, if a husband were to get mekushar and did not provide enough witnesses to sign all the folds, we may ask even unqualified people such as a thief or slave to sign those extra spaces, since the get really does not need any more than 3 witnesses, and the only reason for signing the blank spaces is so that she should be able to use this get in another court. All that is needed is for someone to write his name in the space. As long as there are no empty spaces, the next court will have no reason to think it is invalid. Rabbi Akiva, whoever says, En mashlimin alav ela krovim hareuyin la'id b'makom acher. The only unfit witnesses who can complete it by signing are relatives of the husband or wife or relatives of one of the other witnesses who are fit to testify in other situations, meaning in cases where they are not related to any of the parties. In other words, they are generally fit to serve as witnesses but are disqualified for this get only because they are relatives. However, according to Rabbi Akiva, people who are generally unfit to be witnesses cannot sign in the blank spaces of a get mekushar because people might then think that they are actually qualified witnesses. A thief may not sign it because people might then assume he has repented his sins and is no longer a thief, and they will allow him to testify in other cases. Similarly, a slave may not sign it because people might think that he has been freed and will allow him to marry a Jewish woman. A relative, however, may sign it because everyone knows who the relatives are and they will not allow him to testify for his relative in another case. And the Rav tells us, V'alacha ke Ben Anas, the Halacha follows the opinion of Ben Anas, Shakol mashlimin alav, that anyone can complete it by signing his name on the blank fold. Umikom makom, and nevertheless the Rav explains, En chotem alav ele ed echad pasub levad. We only allow maximum 1 invalid witness. V'ashar tzich shu kulam ksherim, and the other witnesses must be kosher. And the Mishnah continues, Ve'zeu get kereach. And what is a bald get? Kol shekisharav merubin me'edav. Any get mekushar that has more folds than witnesses, which means that some of the folds have not been signed and are bald, meaning empty. And that is end of Mishnah Yud in Perek Ched. We continue now with Perek Tet Mishnah Aleph. As a rule, when a man gives his wife a get, she is divorced only if the get creates a complete separation between them. If she is still legally connected to him in some way, the get does not take effect and she is not divorced at all. An example of this law is where the husband gives the get to his wife on the condition that she may never drink wine for the rest of her life. Since she will always be bound by his condition, the get is not valid. We learn this from the fact that the Torah in Dvarim chapter 24 verse 1 refers to a get as a document of separation. This Mishnah will discuss whether a certain type of exception that a husband makes in a divorce is considered a lack of complete separation. If someone divorces his wife, and says to her when he gives her the get, you are hereby permitted to marry any man except so-and-so, the law is as follows. Rabbi Eliezer matir, Rabbi Eliezer considers the get valid and therefore permits her to marry anyone besides the named person. According to Rabbi Eliezer, the fact that she may not marry that person is not considered a lack of separation. Rabbi Eliezer learns from a verse in Vaikra chapter 21 verse 7 that a get given to a woman can prohibit her to a Kohen even when it does not permit her to marry other men. He concludes from this that a get does not necessarily need to permit a woman to everyone in order to be considered a valid get to some extent. It follows from this that even a get that does not permit her to everyone can be considered a document of separation. In regard to those people, it does permit her to marry. But the sages forbid her to marry anyone because they do consider this a lack of separation. Therefore, the divorce does not take effect at all. And the Rav does tell us, V'alacha kechachamim, the halacha follows the opinion of the sages. And again, the sages' case is referring to a case, Kshamar, when he says, that you are permitted to marry any man except so-and-so, or chutz miploni, or except for so-and-so. The Mishnah now teaches what the husband should do according to the sages to make the divorce valid. Ketzad yaseh, what should the husband now do to divorce her properly? He should take the get back from her and give it to her again. And say to her, you are hereby permitted to any man. Until this point, the Mishnah has discussed the case where the husband did not write the exception into the get itself. He merely said it at the time he gave her the get. The Mishnah now teaches the law according to the sages where this exception was written into the get. If the husband wrote, you are hereby permitted to marry any man except for so-and-so in the get itself, even if he later erased the words except for so-and-so, the get is invalid because the get was written with the intent that she not be able to marry that man. Once the get has been written with this intent, it cannot be made valid. Since the sages do not consider this type of divorce a complete separation, a get written with this exception in it was in effect not written for the purpose of separation. This invalidates the get, as we learned in chapter 3, Mishnah 1. Cutting out the exception from the document does not change the fact that it was not written for the purpose of separation. However, in the first case of the Mishnah, the get was written for the purpose of allowing the wife to marry any man. It was only at the time of the divorce that the husband said that it would not permit her to a certain man. So the get itself was properly written, and he may now use it again as long as he now says to her that he is permitting her to all men. And that is the Nabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.